write them down from Despise.
And I'm not getting too fancy here if I'm in Michael's spot because I think he has the tools in hand to easily win this game. So I would not allow Tom to draw 2 off this Ordeal of Thoughts under any circumstances.
Yeah, and he's going to stop him right there. See you later. Backup creature. Hero of Iros, a Tranquil Cove. Ross still with the God's Willing in hand. Back to Hamilton we'll go. Hamilton will draw a card. It's another copy of Jason's Ingenuity. So now he's got the card drawing.
Yeah.
He is without removal at this point, though Dig Through Time will probably solve that problem.
I think I would just cast one of these card drawers on the main phase here because Michael's not really in a position to bluff very much. And if he finds a lane that comes into play tapped, you'd rather have that ahead of time.
There's an attack for 2. Temple of Enlightenment going to come down for Ross. Top card to the bottom. He'll pass it back. Hamilton will cast a copy of Jason's Ingenuity. 3 cards coming for the blue-black control player. Pearling Ancient among them. Looks like maybe a couple of lands as well. He'll take a draw step for the turn. Perilous Vault. Looks to be one of the cards that he's drawn. Radiant Fountain's going to come into play. Undo the attack from the last turn up to 12. Pass it on back to Ross. Ross will untap and draw. Here's an attack. There's Pearling Ancient. And there's a God's Willing before blocks. So that'll give Pro Blue. There'll also be a Heroic trigger here, so long as Ross did remember it. There that is. So he's got to try to slog through the big 6-7.
And now Tom is out. Has nothing left.
Yep. Dissolve the draw here for Hamilton.
And I suspect this dissolve might be the check mark.
There is a 3rd copy of Dismal Backwater, up to 10. Pearling Ancient going to stay back on defense. Ross will draw a card. It's a Tranquil Cove. He'll gain a life up to 27. And all he can do is pass the turn back here. So Hamilton has a Jason's Ingenuity. And it looks like he's running away with this game. 3 more cards coming. Hero's Downfall, Perilous Vault among them. Hasn't even had to cast his Dig Through Time yet. He'll just simply untap.
Oh, he's waiting to do that on the super cheap.
Yep. Kill your creatures, draw some cards, finish you however I can. That's what the strategy is of this blue-black control deck. There's a Temple of Deceit. Take a look at the top card. That's going to roll to the bottom. It's an attack for 6. That'll work.
And this game right here is the recipe that Michael wants.
Yep.
I mean, he was able to use enough cheap removal to stave off what Tom was doing. Perilous Vaults made things way too awkward. And then his card drawing and removal spells will carry him home.
Another Pearling Ancient here as Hamilton's looking to close it out. Another Dissolve the draw. Now here's a Despise. Wants to make sure the coast is clear. Or also show him a Flooded Strand. The coast is very clear. And this 6-7 Leviathan combo.
Ooh, 7-8, now 8-9.
Oh, yes. This is true with Prowess.
Yeah, Prowess is pretty awkward to put on a creature that's already this big, but whatever, it'll come up.
Rick closes it up, and they'll close it out. Michael Hamilton going to win game number 1 here over Tom Ross. Blue-Black Heroic does win game number 1 over Blue-White. Excuse me, Blue-Black Control wins game number 1 over Blue-White Heroic. As we are going to come back to the booth, it's fine. It's time for the first trivia question. Patrick has the rules, and I have the question.
So Cedric will ask you a question. Tweet your answer at SCG Live and hashtag SCG Premium. Of the correct responses, one will be selected at random for 3 months of Star City Games premium content. Remember, this is about accuracy and not speed, so don't worry about submitting your answer first, just accurately. And please keep in mind that this giveaway is run at the sole discretion of StarCityGames.com, and that Twitch TV is in no way affiliated with giveaways or contests on stream.
It's an easy one this morning. There's a Grand Prix next weekend. Where is it? It is embarrassing, horrifying if they get this wrong. So bad.
But we'll shut down your Twitter account if you get this wrong, because, come on.
We have the power to do that. Hashtag with the answer. Hashtag SCG Premium. Make sure you're following at SCG Live. We'll announce the winner at the conclusion of our final round. Please don't get this wrong.
Do not.
As we head back to the match, we'll take a look at the sideboard. You see that Ross has a Helios Pilgrim, 2 copies of Laguna Band Elder, a Seeker of the Way in Aqueous' form, a Ordeal of Heliod, 2 Ajani's Presence, 2 Erase, 3 Stubborn Denial, and 2 copies of Treasure Cruise. What do we like?
I really like the 2 copies of Ajani's Presence here. I like the 2 copies of Treasure Cruise and the 3 copies of Stubborn Denial. Those are the cards that really stand out to me. I think that Tom can pretty safely get away from some of his less impressive enchantments in this deck. He's playing against a deck that's all removal spells and nothing really in the way of creatures. So cards like Singing Bell Strike, Aqueous Form, Stratus Walk, Ordeal of Heliod, they're not very impressive. So he's got a lot of room to upgrade his deck, and the additional card drawing, the Stubborn Denials, and the Ajani's Presences, I think, are all big upgrades.
4 copies of Jura Merc Lurker, a Prognostic Sphinx, 2 Negate, a Freak Cure, 4 copies of Drowning Sorrow, and 3 Thoughtseizes here for Hamilton. What do you like there?
Well, I think the Merc Lurkers are fine, although Tom can overpower that by loading up on 1 heroic creature. But that plays into Michael's removal spells a little bit. The problem here is that there's a lot of cards that are good but not great. Thoughtseize, Drown in Sorrow, the Merc Lurker. I think Michael wants some mixture of these cards, even the negates, but none of them are superstars. They're just good.
Quick update for you guys on one of our many matches this morning. Andy Ferguson, #1 overall seed with Mardu Aggro, up a game over Sean Evans playing Mardu Walkers. I imagine maybe had something to do with Blood-Soaked Champion.
I know that Tom and Tom's deck right now are the talk of the tournament, but Andy Ferguson's list is my favorite deck in the top 8. I think it just shows such an understanding of what the weaknesses of the traditional Mardu build is and how to address it.
He's done a good job so far. Has not lost a match this weekend, #1 overall seed.
He was the 9-0 that Tom Ross got to draw with in round 10.
Yep. High praise. We'll see if Ross can even things up here with his Blue Heroic deck. I do think this is actually a relatively difficult match. There's just a lot of removal for him to try to slog through.
Yep. I mean, Michael's, if he hits his land drop with a curve of removal spells, I think the real trick is Perilous Vault, because otherwise Michael's playing, kind of trading 1 for 1, and it's hard for him to get the breathing space he needs to resolve his card drawers. Perilous Vault plays so well because Tom has to slow down a little bit. That gives Michael the opportunity to resolve something like Jace's Ingenuity, and from there he can really take over the game.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to watch. Stubborn Denial is a card that probably will have a huge role in this matchup too, after sideboard.
I think it's definitely Tom's best sideboard card in the matchup. I think Treasure Cruise is really good for him as well.
I think that one's really good too, yeah. It's part of the reason that Tom actually moved towards this deck. That's the reason that Brad liked it as well. Is Treasure Cruise does some really nice work against decks that just try to 1-for-1 you into the ground. You can draw 3 cards, pull ahead that way.
Although Michael's deck does have a pretty heavy exiling element between Silence the Believers and Perilous Vault, which we saw a little bit last game.
That's true.
But I think Tom in a long game is still going to be able to get off a Treasure Cruise for very little mana, and will be very happy to do so.
He'll be on the play this game. Of course, when we do have updates for you guys, another match, David Nolan versus Ben Steiner. That's Mardu mid-range against Obs on mid-range, as well as Nicholas Bowen playing Green Black Devotion against Star City Games Standard Open champion from Washington, D.C., Steve Rubin playing Obs on mid-range. We'll let you guys know how that's going as well. Rubin having a really nice tournament this weekend as well. Won his winning in last round after drawing against Todd Anderson in round number 10. Very skilled player. Did win our Standard Open in D.C. a little bit earlier this year. And he's playing the deck that he knows so much about in Obs on mid-range.
Not the most high-profile player, not necessarily a name, but someone who people in the know respect quite a bit.
Yeah, not yet, but soon.
Yeah.
Only 22. Got a lot of Magic left to play in his life, and he's already quite good at it.
Still a pup.
Indeed. Indeed. I can't call him old school, right?
Dude, no way.
I can't do that? Okay. Clarification is key. Well, we'll see what Ross can put together here in game number 2. Down a game right now. Pretty easy going there for Hamilton, honestly. Ross with a little bit of mana issues. Needed another white source of mana to really get going.
That is true, though. I think he would have struggled regardless. I mean, if he had a third land on turn 3, it makes a big difference, but I think Michael's draw would have been a challenge for Tom to contend with no matter what.
And Michael's draw quite good that game.
Very, very solid. I mean, a lot of cheap removal, Perilous Vault. I think that's the combination of cards he's looking for.
And the Vault is it's interesting that no other decks really play that card. This is really the only home for it. I suppose, blue-white has end hostility, so they're okay. They don't really need to play a card like that, but the Vault is really good here.
Well, the rates on creatures in Magic have gotten a lot better, and Perilous Vault sort of demands that you play with very few, if any, creatures at all. It's a demanding deck building challenge, but The card is very powerful.
Both players will lay out their 7. Again, Ross will be on the play. Thinking it over. Looks like he's going to keep it. Let's see what Hamilton's up to. And Tom, coming into this tournament, a big fan of the strategy. Had won a lot of matches in testing. When I talked to him at the early parts of yesterday, he said, I've won 14 of my last 15 matches. Well, he hadn't lost one after that, so we're around, 24, 25 now.
I think he actually said to me, I was looking to come to the tournament and lose 6 games, and I lost 5 at the end of the Swiss rounds, I believe is what he told me.
Nice. Very nice.
So, a lot of these cards are about circumstances and metagames as much as anything else, like Perilous Vault, for example. You can compare Perilous Vault to Oblivion Stone. The rates are pretty similar, but Oblivion Stone saw a lot more play in Standard than Perilous Vault did. And a lot of that had to do with just drawing cards, killing creatures, and playing with very few permanents in general was a more powerful thing to be doing in general than in 2004 than it is to do in 2014. So it's not that Perilous Vault is a weak card. I mean, Blue-Black Control is a good deck, and it plays 4 copies. It's just the circumstances have changed, and it's harder to build decks in the way that you used to be able to.
Hamilton going to take a mulligan here. So he'll be looking at 6 cards in just a sec. Yeah, Ostone's a nice comparison.
They're close. I mean, Oblivion Stone's probably a little bit more powerful. It's cheaper to deploy, and you can synergize a little bit. Exiling on Perilous Vault is not a small thing. In some matchups, that's a huge deal. So, I think they're in the same ballpark. But Oblivion Stone saw a lot more play than Perilous Vault. And a lot of that has to do with just circumstances of the format, the way Magic used to be developed.
Well, let's see what 6 Michael can draw up here.
I really like the way that Michael handled game 1 there, just casting everything when Tom was tapped out.
I
The
do
sequencing
too.
was very good.
No reason to get cute with those removal spells. They say instant on them. You can play them as sorceries, and that's what he did. Temple of Enlightenment is how we started up. Ross going to keep the top card on top. A polluted Delta, back Tom's way. Tom does look to be a little bit mana heavy this go around. Here's a Tranquil Cove. No turn 2 play either. Though the card he kept on top of the Temple was a copy of Stubborn Isle, something he clearly had a lot of interest in keeping. There's an island. We'll go back Ross's way.
Even if he's not doing anything with enabling Ferocious, Michael's deck has so many 3 and 4, 5 mana spells that I think Stubborn Isle is very powerful against Michael.
Heliod's Pilgrim. It's time to search. Ordeal of Thassa is what Ross will be getting. So trying to get his card drawing engine online.
And I think that against an opponent who's mulliganed, Tom might be a little bit more aggressive trying to deploy his enchantments.
Hamilton will draw a card. Copy of Hero's Downfall is what it looks like. But that's an island. So no Bile Blight. No Hero's Downfall to worry about at this point.
The one trick that Michael has access to is Dissolve, potentially Negate.
Plains here for Ross. There's a Hero of Iros. Tom going to see if this resolves. It does. Heliod's Pilgrim to the red zone. And Ross will just pass the turn back with some protection available between counter spells and other things. Looks like Hamilton did draw a land here. He'll sacrifice his Polluted Delta. You have to imagine we're going to see a swamp come out of the deck here.
And Tom, not worried too much about Drown Sorrow here, as he has God's Willing in hand, so he always has the option of protecting Hero of Iros. Doesn't care too much if he loses the Heliod Pilgrim. And it would give a shields down moment for him to deploy Ordeal of Thassa. So even though it looks like Tom is being a little loose about playing around Drown in Sorrow, the circumstances mean he doesn't really mind that much if that's the card Michael has this turn.
There's a Temple. Take a look at the top card. Second Black Source has arrived, though it is a little slow to the party. That card's going to go to the bottom. Back Ross's way. Still has to play around the same cards at this point.
But if Tom is able to get Ordeal of Thassa onto this Hero of Iros and successfully attack, that means Stubborn Denial just becomes counterspell.
Can't forget the auras now cost 1 less. because of the hero. There's your ordeal, trigger heroic. See if ordeal resolves. Looks like it does. There's a flooded strand. Here's an attack. Counter from the ordeal. This will be 5 damage as Hamilton does not have a dissolve.
And the discipline that Tom's showing here is great. He had the option here of using a God's Willing, which would allow him to draw 2 cards, get in an extra point of damage here. But Tom knows that he just wants to fight over removal spells, be more mana efficient than Michael. And there's no rush for him to draw 2 cards here. He can do that next turn, and it's all the same.
Pacing has always been something that Tom has done well whenever he plays an aggro deck. There's Perilous Vault, or at least an attempt. See if this is going to resolve here. Tom does have a copy of Stubborn Denial in his hand, so it wouldn't surprise me if he tries to counter this. And he will, so Stubborn Denial will resolve. That'll take care of the vault. There's a copy of Opulent Palace. And we're also going to sacrifice a Flooded Strand.
And that's a huge deal there for Tom because that's the card that's hardest for him to beat. He controls his entire board. God's Willing and Feat of Resistance provide no defense against it. I don't believe he can kill it once it's in play. There's no needle effects or anything like that, so if he can win the fight over Perilous Vault and force Michael to play removal spells against his tricks, I think Tom's got a great shot.
Battle-wise Hoplite the draw. Gonna crack the ordeal here. 2 cards coming. Pretty big attack. You saw Defiant Strike, one of the cards that was drawn. Do wonder if he has any interest in maybe cashing that in here to get an extra couple points of damage through.
Well, he has a Battle-wise Hoplet in his hand, and the Defiant Strike gives him additional protection against Drown in Sorrow.
Sure.
So I think it's worth saving it this one turn, so Drown in Sorrow doesn't really matter.
Jace's Ingenuity, the draw here for Hamilton. He does have 5 mana, but it's not time to cast that card.
And
Also has a Prognostic Sphinx.
Part of the issue here for Michael is just his land drops have been a little less smooth. He didn't have double black early on in the game. A lot of his lands have come into play tapped. Last game it was, comes into play tap on turn 1 and turn 2, and then just smooth sailings from there on out.
We'll just pass the turn back. Ross will quickly untap. Flooded Strand the draw. He will deploy that. It's time to attack with everybody. Hero's Downfall going to go after the hero of Iroas. Ross, 4 mana. It's in a Johnny's Presence with Strive, and that's going to end this game. So Tom Ross is going to win game number 2 here over Michael Hamilton. Blue-White Heroic and Blue-White Control headed to game number 3 early this morning.
It's telling there, too, because Tom absolutely, positively flooded out of that game. So it wasn't just about Tom having enough lands versus spells like it kind of looked like in for game 1. It's about Tom winning the fight against particular cards, especially Perilous Vault, and he was able to do that game 2.
Yep. Got to keep the vault off the table.
Once that's in play, Tom has to go through some serious contortions to get it off the table. He has to push enough for Michael to use it while leaving enough in reserve that he can still keep playing, and that's asking a lot.
Here do you see the sideboards here? Both players going to go back to the drawing board.
And it wouldn't surprise me if Michael has not brought in the Merc Lurkers. I suppose we'll see.
It's a little slow.
Blocking against Tom's deck is not easy to do, and little points of life gain, it helps, but it's not like he's playing against mono red aggro. Tom, as you can see, is capable of doing huge chunks of damage if his board's not contested.
Update for you guys in our backup match. Steve Rubin up a game here over Nicholas Bowen. Obs on mid-range, up a game over Green Black Devotion. If we can get you guys the update between David Nolan playing Modern mid-range and Ben Steiner playing Obs on mid-range, we will let you know.
And that game 1 win there for Steve Rubin is huge because, like I said, the Doom Blast post-board make the matchup so much better for him that if he's able to get out of game 1, I think he has an enormous edge in the matchup.
It's almost like Nicholas Bowen has to win game number 1 to
That's
win
how
that match.
That's how I feel, too. And shaving out Eidolon of Blossoms is not going to help very much.
Yeah. See the sideboards there. Don't think much will change for either player. Well, both players do have some nice options here. This counter magic for Ross and Stubborn now, very important. Treasure Cruise as well. On Hamilton's side, do like the use of Drown in Sorrow in some situations. Thoughtseize can be okay. Same can be said for Negate. But unsurprisingly, as we have found for most of the day, no one really has a sideboard geared towards beating Blue-White Heroic for this tournament.
I like Drown in Sorrow much more on the play than on the draw.
Me too.
And I think the same thing is true of Thoughtseize, too. So I wouldn't be surprised if Michael did some pretty heavy sideboarding now that he's on the play.
Sure.
Because you can see in that game, Tom was able to get out in front of Drown in Sorrow. He plays a
Very easily.
two drop on 2, and then that's too big to Drown Sorrow away. On the play, Drown Sorrow is going to probably kill at least one creature. That's not great, but if you get a creature removal spell that God's Willing doesn't do anything against, maybe that's worth a slot.
Yeah. There are definitely situations where Drown Sorrow can be awkward and bad. There's also situations where it can be quite good. So not sure if you want the full amount of them after board, but it's definitely an option that Michael has afforded to him that can be useful. Bull players can lay out their 7. Hamilton did mulligan last game, so we'll see if he can find a 7 that he likes this time. Ross taking a look at his opener right now as well. Why is that kind of agonizing look on Tom's face?
Yep.
Can't quite tell if he likes his hand or not. Well, looks like he's going to keep it. Dismal Backwater is going to start game number 3. Hamilton up to 21. Ross will draw.
Good morning,
Plains,
everyone.
favorite hoplite perhaps? Ah, yes, the Laguna Band.
I would assume this card is more of an anti-beatdown measure, but keep in mind, Drown Sorrow and Bioblade do not work against this card.
10 o'clock Legacy Open.
It is basically indestructible.
$40
That's not actually
I
true.
see we're just throwing that term around this morning.
right now.
But you know what I mean.
No line.
Look at that dealer.
He is really something, isn't he?
Ready to go on the offensive eventually.
There is Battlewise Hoplite. Doing okay against Drown and Sorrow this game.
This is a spot where Drown Sorrow is totally fine. He kills a thing. All Michael needs to really concern himself with is keeping his head above water early on. The late game will take care of itself, most likely.
Polluted Delta, maybe? Thought about it. Decisions here for Hamilton. We know he's got the 3rd land. He's just trying to figure out what the play is going to be.
He also has land number 4 that comes into play tap, so I'm not sure if he's contemplating Bioblight plus land that comes into play tap this turn.
That's what it looks like. And there it is, Bioblight plus a Temple. Just so you take a look at the top cards, a Dissolve, Consulting the Grip. You see he's already got a Dissolve. Looks like a couple of copies of Hero's Downfall. So the counter spell is going to go to the bottom. Back to Ross, we're going to go.
Is a little bottlenecked on 3s right now, so even though Dissolve is good, I don't think he wants another 3-mana spell. I think he's more looking for lands and something either cheap or something powerful.
Ross might be in a little bit of trouble here. There is land. That's another copy of Battlewise Hoplite. Just going to pass it back over to Hamilton. Hamilton going to draw a card. Looks like it was a copy of Despise.
And Despise at this point, you know, the ship may have sailed.
A little stink A.
Maybe a little bit of a stinker.
But information can't be worth a mana and a card. So we will take a look here. See a Treasure Cruise, 2 copies of a Johnny's Presence and a Floodstrand. That Despise will whiff.
Yes. And his spot removal is going to be tough to use effectively this game.
I think tough is putting it nice.
Trying to be nice. It's a new thing. For now, at least.
Despise is done resolving. There is a 3rd land, Polluted Delta. So 3 mana available. Ross will draw a card. Another creature, it looks like. One thing he doesn't have in this situation is a counterspell.
Although Ajani's presence is pretty close. It's
Ish.
only Perilous Vault that's the big wrinkle in all of this.
Yep. There's Flooded Strand.
I mentioned this
Style.
yesterday, but it's hilarious to me that Tom's deck of all creatures, lands, and enchantments is able to sideboard Treasure Cruise effectively.
Well, that just shows the power of the cruise.
Also
what that
shows,
is.
also shows the power of Flooded Strand.
True. So very true. An attack for 2. Hamilton going to go down to 19. There's a hero. And it looks like a passing of the turn. Again, Hamilton does have a copy Dissolve, 2 copies of Hero's Downfall in hand, so he can counter this, maybe Scry, or he can Hero's Downfall this at the end of turn if he'd like. We'll see.
I kind of like using the Dissolve because I think the Dissolve is just the harder card to use in a general sense.
Especially when you do know the contents of Tom's hand as well after the despise, so you know exactly what he's up to.
Yeah, that's the second factor here in this also, is that you know he can play back against Hero's Downfall. He can't play back against your Dissolve, based on what you know. And the Dissolve is always going to be trickier to time anyway. And if you play a Hero's Downfall right now, then he gets to use his copy of Ajani's Presence. And that's another card in the graveyard for the Treasure Cruise.
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting if he'll use a Johnny's Presence here or not. I think I find this part of the game really interesting. And it looks like he's going to, because there's a world that exists where I think he's like, okay, that's in the graveyard, that's fine because I'm working my way towards Treasure Cruise.
I think that's the tiebreaker.
Sure.
If he's close about whether or not he wants to use the Presence there, the fact that it's another spell in the graveyard and he can cast Treasure Cruise next turn, I think breaks it open.
Okay. Ah, very cheap murderous cut here.
What a deal.
Yep. There goes the hero with the mana available to cast Dissolve or Hero's Downfall yet again. Ross going to draw a card here. A Plains. Flooding out a little bit.
He still has that Treasure Cruise in reserve. It's just an issue of trying to be able to resolve it at some point. And I suppose that's the big incentive for Michael to play it this way, is that he has a Dissolve as backup against Treasure Cruise.
Andy Ferguson going to win his match over Sean Evans, #1 overall seed with Mardu aggro. Moving on to the semifinals, he'll play the winner, David Nolan, playing Mardu midrange, and Ben Steiner, playing Obzon midrange. Here's a Cruise. There's a Dissolve. Big counter spell there for Hamilton. He'll take a look at the top card. I believe it's the Dissolve again, and he's going to leave that on top. Here's an attack. Ross going to put Hamilton down to 16. This game is going exactly how Michael would like it to.
Not quite as dominant as he was in game one, but the pacing right now very good.
And pass the turn back over to Ross. Ross going to draw a card. Didn't get a great look. Here's an attack for 2.
I think it was another land.
Back to Hamilton will go. Pearl Link Ancient. Not the best draw on the deck at this point. Ross with another land and attack for 2. Hamilton down to 12. Ross going to play a Plains. Pass the turn back over to Hamilton, who's going to draw a card. Another copy of Pearl Link Ancient.
And if Michael was able to draw land number 6 during this time, he would have Hero's Downfall with Dissolve backup, and that's a much different game. Instead, he's drawn back-to-back Pearl Link Agents, by far the worst draws in the deck at this point. And even though Tom's flooding out really badly, he's still in this one.
Favorite Hoplite does come in. It's a dismal backwater there for Hamilton. That's land number 6, and it comes into play tapped. Ross will draw. Didn't get a great look. Looked like it was another creature. Here's an attack for 3. Good to go. Hamilton down to 8. Play a Plains, pass the turn back over to Hamilton, who's going to draw a card. That one looks like it may be a land. Yes, a Temple of Silence. Another land that comes into play tapped, but scrying is quite powerful. That card will go to the bottom. Ross will untap. Can he get out of this one alive? Heliod's Pilgrim the draw. That's interesting.
Gotta be one of his higher impact draws at this stage.
Oh, yeah.
I think this turn, Tom, if he attacks, needs to also send in his Lagoonabon Elder, even though it looks a little funky. Because if he ends up striving Silence the Believers, he wants to make sure that's in combat. If he's doing this instead, it probably doesn't matter, but...
Heliod's Pilgrim. Dissolved. Can't let that one go. Ross ready to attack here with his creatures. Top card going to go to the bottom.
Tom has again set up Ajani's Presence against against Hero's Downfall, which is excellent.
Looks like he's considering maybe using his spells, maybe not. He's just going to pass the turn back. You see the hand here for Hamilton. Hero's Downfall, 2 copies of Pearl Ancient.
And Michael's turn, next turn, is likely just to be a Pearl Lake Agent, and that's not that likely to get it done here.
So he's going to use the Downfall now, it looks like.
I mean, if he's going to do this, it has to be post-combat, because he knows this isn't going to work, and it's just going to result in more damage.
Yep, and this is post-combat, which a play I actually like.
Yeah.
Hamilton will draw. Drown in Sorrow.
And what's dooming Michael here is just efficiency. Too
Yep.
many turns where he didn't do anything, and now stuck with 3 cards in his hand, can only play one of them a turn. And if Tom left a card off top of a scry, I think he's likely to be able to power through a Pearl Occasion.
This draw is actually a Treasure Cruise. That's a nice one. That's 3 cards coming. God's Willing, Battlewise Hoplite, and Ordeal of Thassa.
Everyone.
And I think God's Willing might be the lock here.
Yeah, I think so.
It is less than
Everybody
2
coming.
minutes
There's the Ancient.
remaining in legacy registration.
God's Willing, I believe, goes after the Battlewise Hoplite on blue. That'll tick that up. A little scry action. That's 4 power coming through. He can block 1 creature. He can't block them both.
Now,
And Tom squeezes through exact lethal, it looks like.
And you see Michael's going to figure out, is there anything that I can do to work myself out of this? Battlewise Hoplite, again, is a 4 power creature with protection from blue. So that's coming in for sure. And that is going to do it. Tom Ross going to win this match where Michael Hamilton and Brad Nelson will give him a pat on the back. Blue-White Heroic is going to move through to the semifinals in a very close match. Michael was able to be efficient in the very first game, stumbled and fumbled in games 2 and 3, and Ross able to make it out alive.